Welcome back to the old Photo Vault channel. Some moments captured on camera weren't meant for human eyes. Are you brave enough to look? The Last Dance of Marjorie Hale, Community Hall, Ohio. Autumn 1958. It looks like an ordinary conga line, the kind Tom Bennett always organized when the band grew tired and the night needed steering. Annie Porter laughs softly behind him, her dress crisp and new, while shy Delia Marks tries to match the rhythm. Nothing seems unusual except Annie's glance toward the camera, hesitant, almost apologetic, as though she senses someone else has slipped into the frame. Just past Tom's shoulder, a pale woman stands where no one remembers standing. Her name was Marjorie Hale, a local girl who drowned in the river 20 years earlier on the night she never made it to the autumn dance. People said she had practiced her steps for weeks. Here she appears again, faint but neatly poised, as if waiting for someone to open the line for her. And the odd thing is, there is a space held gently, as if they all remember her. The Quiet Vigil of Elias Ward, St. Augustine Mausoleum, Louisiana. Winter 1934. The crypt was once a tidy place, or so the caretaker used to say, with lilies changed weekly and the marble washed until it shone. Now the walls shed their paint in curled strips like old skin giving up its shape. The coffin in the center rests at a slight angle as though someone nudged it, and then politely stepped back. Light from the narrow doorway falls across the altar, where a single cross still stands upright despite the years. If you look closely at the space beneath it, you can see the faint outline of Elias Ward, the quiet seminarian who died here during the Great Freeze of '34. He had come to pray for a family he'd wronged slipping into the mausoleum to escape the storm. Folks believed he never left because forgiveness never came. Even now, he seems to lean forward, listening, waiting for a voice he's certain must arrive someday. The Rosekeeper's Promise, Hawthorne Estate Garden, Virginia. Spring 1912. Evelyn Harrow always visited the garden in late afternoon when the sun slipped through the heavy oak branches and softened everything it touched. She moved slowly among the rose bushes, lifting each bloom as if greeting an old friend. The gardener used to say Evelyn had a calming effect on the flowers, though he never explained how he knew. In the photograph, she appears serene, concentrating on a single pale rose, unaware of the figure lingering behind her. That faint, luminous shape is Nathaniel Gray, the estate's former groundskeeper, who died the previous winter after promising Evelyn he would finish restoring the garden. He had tended it since boyhood and refused to leave it untended even in death. If you study the image long enough, you may notice the roses nearest him, leaning slightly forward as though listening. Evelyn, too, tilts her head, almost smiling like someone who senses a presence just beyond understanding. The Hidden Expression of Lila Crow, Marigold Conservatory, New York. Autumn 1894. In those days, headless portraits were a harmless studio novelty, a trick of double exposure meant to amuse the more fashionable families. Lila Crow agreed to one, only because the photographer insisted it would make her look modern, though she preferred quieter things, pressed flowers, soft music from the parlor, the feel of warm sunlight through lace curtains. She sat perfectly still. As instructed, her dress gathered carefully, her posture modest and unremarkable. What no one expected was the second face that appeared beneath the planter, a pale, watching expression that certainly wasn't Lila's. Locals later identified it as Ephraim Bell, the orphaned groundskeeper who had died in the conservatory's fire years before. He had loved tending the plants, especially the tall ferns kept in that striped urn. In the final print, Ephraim's face seems almost relieved, as though he had been waiting for someone patient enough to notice him. The Watcher of Old Pines, Arkhangelsk Forest, Northern Russia. Early autumn 1906. The photograph was meant to document traditional dress, nothing more. Elena Morozova stood quietly among the trees, her ceremonial coat falling in heavy folds, the embroidered hood framing her face, with an almost solemn patience. She had worn this garment only once before at her brother Luca's memorial, though no one mentioned that detail the day the camera arrived. The forest behind her seems ordinary at first, soft gray and resigned to the season's chill. But near her left shoulder, half hidden among the reeds, a pale figure rises like mist, learning to take human shape. Locals recognized him immediately as Luka Morozov, who vanished during a late winter hunt and was found months later, hands folded as though peacefully waiting. In the photograph, Luka's faint outline leans toward Elena, almost protective. And though she faces the camera, her eyes tilt slightly to the left, as if acknowledging someone she expected to follow her long after the living had gone home. The ghost in the window. Hartwell Dormitory, Ohio. Late summer, 1967. It was the kind of evening college girls remembered fondly, later bare feet on old carpet. A borrowed record spinning somewhere down the hall, the sweet rebellion of a cigarette shared between friends. Marjorie Pike lounged across the bed, laughing at a joke she wouldn't recall while Beth Turner tried to look sophisticated, holding her cigarette just so. Someone had left the window cracked to let out the smoke. Though the air drifting in felt strangely cool for August. Only when the photograph was developed did they notice the shape just beyond the glass, a pale figure rising in the swirl of smoke, its outline too deliberate to be a trick of light. Beth swore it resembled Rosemary Hale, the student who'd vanished the year before after a night of wandering the campus alone, lost in her own quiet troubles. The others dismissed it, though Marjorie later admitted she remembered a moment brief and unsettling, when the smoke near the window curled as if greeting someone familiar. The Last Toast of Evelyn Shore. Brighton Ballroom, New Jersey, New Year's Eve, 1954. The party had ended the way such nights often did: too much confetti underfoot, half-finished drinks tilting on tabletops, and a few stubborn revelers unwilling to let the hours settle. Jack Turner and his date Louise had slipped to the floor in a tangle of laughter, their whispered promises drowned beneath the rustle of paper streamers. The ballroom lights glowed faintly, as if embarrassed to still be awake. Toward the back, framed by the clutter of party hats and champagne bottles, a woman stands almost too still. Her name was Evelyn Shore, the hostess of the event the year before, who never made it to midnight. People said she adored New Year's Eve, the ritual of renewal, the chance to begin again, so it felt fitting they claimed she returned each year to watch others celebrate what she could not. In the photograph, her outline seems to hover just beyond the edge of recognition, as though waiting patiently for someone to notice she has not missed a single countdown since. The unfinished goodbye of Rosa Ledesma. Garden Terrace, Cafe, California. Spring 1972. They were celebrating nothing in particular, just the warm night air and the novelty of being young together. Daniel Ruiz kept one protective arm around Elena Varela, who seemed both pleased and slightly embarrassed by the attention. The cafe's geraniums bowed lazily in the breeze, and somewhere behind them, a waiter clattered dishes with cheerful indifference. It was the kind of moment couples later remembered as the beginning of something. But in the upper left of the frame, just above Elena's shoulder, a faint figure emerges, soft, blurred, leaning forward, as though trying to join the conversation. Her name was Rosa Ledesma, Elena's older cousin, who died unexpectedly the year before, a few days shy of her engagement. Rosa had adored the cafe. She and Elena used to sit at that very table whispering about dresses and futures. In the photograph, her expression is gentle, almost wistful, as if she's grateful to witness a happiness she once planned for herself, and reluctant to let the moment slip without being part of it just once more. The reflection of Claradine. Maplewood Boarding House, Illinois. Winter 1961. It was an ordinary evening for Joyce Miller, who had just finished arranging her dresser the way she liked, bottles lined by height and the little mirror angled to catch the soft lamp glow. She perched on her bed in her new nightdress, smiling with a shy pride that suggested she felt for once almost grown. The room itself was quiet, except for the hum of the radiator and the faint settling of floorboards in the hall. But when the photograph was developed, two odd shapes appeared. One hovered near the bed, pale and upright, like someone trying not to intrude. The other glowed in the dresser mirror, a burst of light that seemed too round, too intentional to be a flaw in the film. Older tenants recognized the presence immediately. Claradine, a former boarder who died in her sleep 5 winters earlier, known for checking her reflection, compulsively worried she might vanish if she didn't confirm herself daily. In the photo, the light in the mirror looks almost like a face, soft, patient, and strangely relieved, as though Clara finally found someone willing to see her clearly. The walk of Brother Matthias. Capuchin Crypt. Palermo, autumn 1923. The monk in the center of the photograph is Brother Aldo, performing the annual inspection of the preserved dead, a task he approached with the same dutiful calm he brought to everything. The skeletons propped neatly in their alcoves were said to be arranged according to old vows, each figure representing a life once lived with quiet discipline. Visitors claimed the room felt colder than the surrounding corridors, though Aldo always insisted it was only the stone. But near the fourth alcove, a faint blur steps forward, almost as if emerging from the ribcage of the mummified brother beside it. Older monks recognized the outline immediately. Brother Matthias Leone, a gentle soul who died of fever decades earlier after collapsing mid-prayer. Matthias had been known for wandering the corridors at night, whispering blessings to anyone he encountered living or dead. In the image, his presence seems hesitant, as though he isn't sure whether he's meant to join the silent ranks or continue his rounds. And Brother Aldo's slight turn of the head, barely noticeable, suggests he may have felt Matthias pass by warm as breath, yet light enough to stir only the dust. The whisper among the coffins. San Callisto Catacombs, Rome, spring 1919. The researchers had descended only to catalog, not to linger. The catacomb chamber was cramped, littered with open coffins, whose occupants had long since surrendered to dust. The lamplight barely reached the edges of the room, settling instead on the withered forms laid out as neatly as time allowed. Most of the scholars treated the task with professional detachment, noting measurements and decay as calmly as if discussing weather. But one coffin second from the right held a curious, almost tender emptiness, as though someone had recently risen from it. That soft blur near its foot wasn't noticed until the photograph was developed. Locals recognized the outline Luciano Ferretti, an altar boy buried in haste during the cholera outbreak of 1854. He had been known for comforting the sick lingering at their bedsides long after he was dismissed. In the image, Luciano appears as a slight, pale shimmer, leaning forward as though checking on the others, making certain they are not frightened by this new intrusion. And the strangest part, his coffin, though centuries old, looks faintly disturbed, as if he still slips in and out, performing his quiet rounds. The Sisters of the Chalk Room, Blackthorn Manor, London. Winter, 1888. It was meant to be a playful portrait, after tea, nothing more. Eleanor Blackthorn stands tall, gloved hand, resting protectively on the head of her younger sister Lottie, who leans into the gesture with theatrical delight. Their dresses, carefully chosen all tassels and satin, show the kind of confidence the Blackthorn girls were known for. The photographer's lamp flickered once, then steadied, giving the room that faintly expectant calm old portraits often have. Only afterward did anyone notice the chalk writing on the wall. "What thou wilt a phrase, no one in the household admitted to scrawling." And below it, half lost in the shadowed corner, a pale figure kneels with a reverence that feels unsettlingly deliberate. Family lore claimed the specter belonged to Agnes Whitaker, a governess dismissed years earlier after she began whispering strange philosophies to the children, insisting the house itself listened. Agnes died soon after leaving, but neighbors often reported seeing her linger near the windows, as if checking whether her lessons had taken root. In the photograph, Eleanor's slight tilt of the head suggests she senses something behind her, something she chooses with practiced grace not to acknowledge. The piano room visitor. Whitcomb House, Surrey. Early spring, 1909. Mrs. Adeline Marsh sits primly near the hearth, her book balanced on her lap, as though she's paused mid-sentence, waiting for the photographer to finish fussing with his tripod. Across the room, her daughter Clara settles at the piano hands, resting lightly on the keys, prepared to offer the polite little waltz she always played when company visited. The dog, faithful and aging, sits in its accustomed spot before the fireplace, gazing toward the piano with mild anticipation. Only later did they notice the faint, upright shimmer beside the instrument, easy to overlook at first, like a trick of reflected light. But the shape grew clearer the longer one stared, the slight stoop of the shoulders and the tilt of a head, listening closely. It resembled Henry Marsh Adeline's late husband, who died 3 winters earlier after insisting the old piano be repaired so the house would never fall silent. In the photograph, Clara's posture looks subtly changed, as though she's bracing for the familiar, gentle correction Henry once offered slower. On the left hand, my dear, a whisper. Only she seems to hear, even now. The Garden Guardian, Merrill Homestead, Tennessee. Late summer, 1938. Lydia Merrill had always preferred the quiet of her garden to the noise of the house. She sat for the photograph only because her granddaughter insisted cradling one of the season's stubborn chicks, with the same gentle firmness she used on all living things. The sun had already dipped low, softening the edges of her white blouse and the rows of plants behind her. Lydia's expression, serene, almost amused, suggested she thought the whole business unnecessary, but harmless. It was only weeks later, after the film was developed, that the figure in the background drew whispers. A blurred, upright shape, watching from among the leaves, with a posture too familiar to dismiss. Family members recognized it as Elias Merrill, Lydia's son, who drowned in the creek behind the property when he was 16. Lydia never spoke of the boy afterward, tending his favorite patch of garden as though it still needed his company. In the photograph, her slight tilt toward the left seems unintentional at first, until one notices the chick staring in the same direction, as if both sensed Elias standing quietly among the plants, keeping the garden he once loved. The Porch at Dusk. Willow Bend Farm, North Carolina. Early autumn, 1911. They gathered on the wide porch the way families do when the heat finally breaks. Henry rocking with restless energy, his sister May smoothing her skirts, and quiet Ruth leaning in to hear whatever secret was being shared. At the far end, Clara and her sweetheart sat far too close for propriety, though no one seemed inclined to correct them. The hammock ropes creaked softly in the shifting breeze, and the fields beyond lay washed in the pale, forgiving light of dusk. It wasn't until the photograph was printed that the faint outline near the steps became impossible to ignore. A slim figure, blurred and upright, as though paused mid-approach. It resembled Jonathan Avery, the eldest son who died the previous winter after wandering into an unexpected storm. Jonathan had always loved the porch, its vantage, its conversations, the feeling of belonging, even when no words were spoken. In the picture, the hammock nearest the apparition sags slightly, as if bearing a small, familiar weight, and May's unfocused gaze drifting past Henry suggests she sensed someone standing just out of reach, waiting to be welcomed back into the circle. The girl in the doorway. Fairview Apartments, Wisconsin. Summer 1974. It had been one of those cramped laughing parties where nobody quite knew whose birthday they were celebrating. Music from a battered stereo pulsed just a little too loud, and the girls danced barefoot on the thin carpet, their hair flying with the easy confidence of the young. Someone had strung a curtain of beads over the doorway, and it chimed faintly each time another guest slipped in or out. In the corner, Linda Hartley sat cross-legged watching the party with the mild, detached curiosity she was known for. When the photo came back from the drugstore, though, Linda noticed something the others somehow missed behind the dancers half hidden in the doorway was a pale figure shaped like a girl standing very still. The outline resembled Martha Cullen, the tenant who'd lived in that apartment before them, and who died there the previous winter, quietly, without anyone noticing, for days. Martha had been shy, the sort who hovered at the edges of parties without ever joining. In the picture, the beads part slightly around her, as if she'd stepped forward, hoping just this once to be included in the noise she never felt brave enough to enter while alive. The path by the bluff, Windermere Coast, Maine. Late spring 1904. The three women had come out for a leisurely walk, their wide-brimmed hats bobbing gently as they followed the sandy trail skirting the bluff. Margaret led with her usual certainty, while sisters Helen and Ruth drifted behind her, pausing now and then to comment on the wildflowers. The day was mild, the ocean air lifting the hems of their skirts just enough to feel playful, but not improper. They were discussing where to take tea when Margaret stopped, saying she felt a curious chill despite the sun. No one noticed the shape rising near the brush until the photograph was developed, a figure pale as sea foam, leaning slightly forward, as if trying to catch up. Local families knew the story. Eliza Dray, a young woman swept from the cliffs a decade earlier, her body never recovered. She had been walking this same path alone on an afternoon, very much like this one. In the picture, her drifting form seems poised mid-step, as though she recognizes the chatter of companions she once longed for, lingering on the trail she never quite finished. The third girl by the creek, Briar Hollow, Kentucky, summer 1978. They had come down to the water to escape the heat settling in the grass, where the trees arched like a loose canopy overhead. Emily toyed with a pebble between her fingers, while Dana balanced her sunglasses on her head, the two of them sharing the easy, languid silence of girls who had known each other too long to force conversation. The afternoon smelled of damp earth and sun-warmed leaves, and the creek below them murmured its slow approval. Only after the film was developed did anyone notice the pale, upright shape hovering between the birch trunks behind them. It had the outline of a girl, though thinner blurred, as if unfinished. Locals remembered Lydia Crowther, a shy teenager who drowned in that same creek 6 years earlier while trying to follow Emily and Dana on a dare she wasn't quite brave enough to complete. In the picture, Emily's shoulders are angled slightly left, as though something cool brushed past her, and Dana's faint frown, captured just before she looked over her shoulder, suggests she felt for a moment as if the trio was finally complete again. The listener behind the lamp. Rutledge Parlor, Boston, winter 1896. Evenings at the Rutledge home often gathered themselves around the piano, where Henry played with a seriousness that made everyone else straighten a little in their chairs. His sister Florence hummed along under her breath, while their cousin Edith traced the sheet music with one careful finger. The room itself glowed with a soft, civilized warmth, the wallpaper, the brocade chairs, the small lamp flickering politely on its table. It was the sort of moment they might have forgotten had someone not thought to photograph it. When the print was developed, however, the left side revealed something no one recalled, a pale shape leaning in just behind the lamp. Its posture strangely intent, as if listening with more hunger than delight. Some believed it resembled Margaret Rutledge, Henry's fiancée, who died 2 weeks before their planned wedding after falling ill in the early winter snow. She had adored music, especially the informal parlor concerts Henry hosted, just to make her laugh. In the photograph, Henry's head tilts ever so slightly toward that corner, so slight it might be dismissed. Yet his expression carries a familiar softness, as though for one fragile instant, he felt her presence returning to the only place she ever felt fully at home. The veil beside the bride. San Aurelio Reception Hall, Havana. Summer, 1956. Everything about the photograph suggests a perfectly ordinary wedding supper. The bride leaning forward with practiced poise, the groom still flushed from the ceremony, relatives arranged with the stiff pride of people who've worn formal clothes too long. Glasses sparkle on the tablecloth, and someone has placed a small bouquet right where the camera would catch it. Even the woman standing behind the seated guests looks as though she's simply waiting for her turn to congratulate the couple. But when the picture was developed, the bride's veil held a strange distortion, soft, pale like a second face, brushing through the lace. Some recognized it immediately as Isabel Romero, the bride's elder sister who died the year before from a sudden illness that left the family stunned and unprepared. Isabel had been the one who helped plan the wedding long before anyone expected she wouldn't be there to see it. If you look closely, the bride's shoulders seem angled not toward her new husband, but slightly left as though she felt someone standing beside her in gentle approval. And the woman behind her eyes, fixed on a point no one else sees, appears to be watching Isabel's arrival with a quiet, knowing calm. The guest in the mirror, Linden Street, Philadelphia. Winter 1962. The family had gathered for one of their noisy Sunday dinners, the kind where everyone talked at once and nobody minded. Plates clattered wine was poured too generously, and Aunt Rosa kept leaning over to fix someone's collar or tell a joke she'd nearly forgotten. The room was warm with a familiar chaos of people who know each other well enough to argue and laugh in the same breath. Behind them, the tall mirror reflected the whole scene, or almost. In the glass just beyond the cluster of shoulders and shifting faces, a pale figure lingered with a stillness that didn't match the din of the room. Her outline was unmistakably feminine, her posture patient, almost wistful. Some in the family later insisted it was Estelle Marchand, the matriarch, who died 2 winters earlier, but had never missed a single Sunday supper in her life. On the left side of the table, Rosa's smile falters just slightly, as though she felt a draft or a hand lightly brushing past her. And the mirror's reflection, just a hair brighter around Estelle's figure, suggests she had come not to haunt, but simply to keep her place among them exactly where she always sat. The Kiss in the Kitchen, Cedar Lane, Ohio. Christmas Eve, 1971. It was late enough that most of the guests had drifted home, leaving only the soft clatter of dishes and the faint hum of carols from the living room. Daniel and Marcy slipped into the kitchen, believing themselves unseen, their laughter dissolving into a kiss that felt so private they barely noticed the camera flash. The shelves behind them, lined with glassware reserved for better occasions, glowed warmly in the dim light, and the wreath above seemed to lean in like a silent witness. Only when the photo was developed did Marcy notice the pale figure standing in the hallway to the left, as if caught mid-step. It resembled Grace Hollander, Daniel's first girlfriend, who had died in a car accident 2 winters earlier. Grace had once spent every Christmas Eve in that very kitchen, helping Marcy's mother wrap gifts long after the others went to bed. In the picture, the shadowed outline tilts slightly toward the couple, not accusing, but longing, like someone who remembers being loved in this room, and has returned for a fleeting moment to feel the warmth again. The figure on the moor. Glenrath Highlands, Scotland. Early spring, 1910. Malcolm Fraser rarely permitted photographs, claiming they stole the softness from a moment. But the neighbor insisted, saying Malcolm looked noble, with his lamb tucked close and the wind pressing his heavy cloak around him. The moor stretched out in its usual, unhurried way, muted and endless, the kind of landscape where a sound seemed to vanish before reaching the ear. Malcolm stood patiently, eyes narrowed against the pale sun, as though listening for something behind the silence. Only later did the developed print reveal the blurred figure standing a distance behind him, tall, stooped, and unmistakably human in outline. Villagers would whisper it resembled Ewan Fraser, Malcolm's younger brother, who vanished the previous winter during a storm that swallowed both man and sheep alike. Ewan had been known to wander too far, chasing after strays with a gentleness that often distracted him from the changing sky. In the photograph, Malcolm's grip on the lamb looked slightly tightened, his gaze not toward the camera, but just off to the right. where the wind had carried a faint, familiar whistle, one he hadn't heard since the night Ewan disappeared. The echo below the keep, Dunmere, Castle, Wales. Late autumn 1902. They called it the lower room, as though avoiding the word cell made its history gentler. The stone walls held a chill that felt older than the castle itself, and the chains carefully arranged now for tourists hung with the obedient stillness of objects, long resigned to silence. Rowan Price, the caretaker, had been cataloging the room for a heritage survey, noting the angles of the brickwork and the curious notch in the far wall where light never seemed to settle. Only when he developed the photograph did he notice the faint figure rising near the floor, as though gathering shape from the cold air. Locals believed it was Anwen Llewellyn, a quiet servant girl who vanished in the winter of 1841 after being accused of stealing bread she never touched. They said she wandered the lower passages, waiting for someone to believe her. In the picture, the smallest chain hangs at a slightly different angle, as if stirred by a presence patient enough to stay hidden, yet hopeful enough to step forward when finally seen. Thank you for staying with me through these haunting photographs and the stories behind them. If you felt even the slightest chill, imagine what else is still hidden out there. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who dares to look a little closer. And if you have your own mysterious photo, send it in. Your story might be next.